Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. So, just to introduce myself, my name's Tom Rogers, and I'm my title is Education Outreach Manager of SPCC, Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. And so I deal with anything on the education side of things, basically. So one of the main things I do is we've got a very large team of volunteers that go around the country trying to get into schools to give our presentation on abortion. So if you have any contacts at your local school, or we'll be able to get a speaker into your child's school, then we'd be happy to sort that out. Another thing I do now is I'm sort of basically now running what we call our Safe at School campaign. So this is really what we're going to focus on tonight, which is all about we campaign really for parental rights over relationships and sex education, the rights of parents to determine what their children should be taught and when. And we obviously seek to protect children from forms of relationships and sex education that we believe are damaging to them. So I've had a few conversations with you all already tonight. So this is obviously a subject that strikes deep in the heart of many of us as Catholics, and as far as Catholic teaching goes, parents, we're the primary educators of our own children, because it's in participation with God. We're the ones that have conferred life on our children, and we have the closest natural relationship with them. So the Church affirms that this is a God-given parental right and duty, which, in the words of John Paul II, is irreplaceable and inalienable, and therefore incapable of being entirely delegated to others or usurped by others. And this is even more so the case with relationships and sex education, particularly when you think about it, given the profound influence that such formation could potentially have on the values and the conduct of our young people, the subsequent impact on their health, well-being, purpose and fulfillment in this life, as well as the whole vocation in the spirit and eternal salvation in the next. Because let's face it, no one's going to go to hell because of their bad grammar or any other aspect of their academic education, but Scripture states that they can well do for unrepentant sexual sins, as well as the impacts that they have on their health and well-being in this life. So it's a situation that's very important to us. So what I'm going to do tonight is we're going to start by outlining what is the current situation and law and regulations regarding relationships and sex education in our country at the moment. I'm talking specifically about England because the situation is a bit different in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. We're going to talk about how schools and the government and outside organisations have been kind of getting around the law and abusing the law, and so how it's all working in practice, and the situation that many parents are finding themselves in. Then going to go on to talk about what's coming next. We had a big shock really in March of last year when some amendments were made to what's known as the Children's Social Work Act, which was a piece of legislation all about children in care, and there'd been a big campaign to introduce compulsory sex and relationships education for some time, so we've been fighting it for a long time, but eventually the government allowed it to go through as an amendment to that bill. So that's introduced some major changes. So I'm going to talk about that and the kind of problems with it and the situations that we might be facing because of it. Then we can have a bit of a break for questions and discussions, and then important part afterwards, you'll probably all be thinking then, well, what can I do about it? So I'll be giving some tips and advice on how to approach schools and complain and all that, and maybe some of you like to share your own experiences about that sort of thing as well. So, called the talk Relationships and Sex Education Enforcing the Official New State Ideology, because that's really what it's all about now. We're going to be talking quite a bit about the LGBT agenda, because really that's the main kind of justification for what this change in the law. I mean, we've really gone beyond just being concerned about sort of too much, too young, too explicit sex education at too early age. That's still a problem, and we need to do something about it. But really, we've gone beyond that into just the complete kind of deconstruction of God's natural order, and marriage and family and all of that. So this is a really sort of huge ideological tidal wave that we're facing now. So dealing with new things every day. It's like it's this huge sort of transgender juggernaut as well that we're facing. It just gets more and more extreme. But there is something we can do about it. So first of all, let's look at the current situation. So what exactly do children have to learn? What exactly are your rights as a parent under the law? So the current legal situation is this. So local authority maintained schools, that's schools that are under control of the local education authority, run by the council, state funded. They're obliged to teach sex and relationships education from age 11 plus, and they must have regard to the Department of Education's SRE guidance. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that guidance in a moment. So academies and free schools, so that's schools not under the control of the local authority, controlled by a board of trustees, etc. They don't have to follow the national curriculum, so they're not under the obligation to deliver sex and relationships education, but if they decide to teach SRE, and many of them do, then they have to have regard to the SRE guidance. At the moment, until the new law comes into force, parents are free to withdraw their children from SRE if they so wish, except for the biological aspects of human growth and reproduction that are essential elements of the national curriculum science. So, that can be kind of obviously taught in quite sort of objective, scientific way, but I'll explain in a bit how that's been kind of abused in many schools to introduce sex education by the back door, which then parents are unable to withdraw their children from. Now, in private schools or independent schools, fee-paying schools, those not funded by the state, they don't have to teach the national curriculum. SRE is not compulsory, but they are required to teach PSHE, that's personal, social and health education, through something called the Independent School Standards. And it's recommended in the SRE guidance that sex and relationships education is kind of taught within that PSHE and citizenship framework. So, many private or independent schools do deliver SRE, especially if they want to get a good Ofsted report. So I mentioned the SRE guidance. So this was the last published guidance was in 2010. This is why proponents of compulsory sex and relationships education have been saying, oh, it's really outdated now because it doesn't mention of the digital threats like internet pornography and sexting and all that. So that was part of the sort of justification for this big push for compulsory SRE. So the guidance then, just to tell you first of all some positive points about it. It's got some positive points, even though it was published in 2010, when the culture had radically changed already. It still stresses that pupils should be taught about the nature and importance of marriage and family life for children. So this is really influenced by the Education Act 1996, which does stipulate that SRE should stress the importance of marriage and family life. It stresses that parents should be consulted. SRE should reflect parents' wishes and the communities the schools serve. So obviously a nod towards faith communities. It says that the reasons and benefits of delaying sexual activity should be covered. So absence is not just rejected out of hand. And importantly as well, it says that it's not about, this is a direct quote, it's not about promotion of sexual orientation or sexual activity. This would be inappropriate teaching. So, at the moment, if you're at a school and the whole LGBT thing is being pushed, then you can point to the SRE guidance to counter that. But it's got a number of bad points as well, not surprisingly. So obviously, it's very suffused with the whole secular, relativistic morality. So marriage is very much undermined, although it keeps the thing from the Education Act 1996 about the importance of marriage. It also recognises that there's strong and mutually supportive relationships outside marriage. So, automatically the teaching on marriage is being undermined. It states that children should learn about contraception and the range of local, national sexual health advice, contraception and support services. So, this was all linked to the, very ambitious teen pregnancy strategy that was introduced by, Tony Blair, first of all, where, he declared that teenage conceptions were going to be sort of, halved in the next 10 years. So the stress is very much on the avoidance of unplanned pregnancy and not by abstinence. So the problem with that is that it sort of, recommends bringing in outside support workers, health workers, nurses, and the trouble is they are all required to follow the Department of Health codes of conduct. So, that includes confidentiality for under 16s. They, the nurse or health worker doesn't have to inform the parents if they're supplying contraception to them or even referring them for an abortion, if they judge that they are competent to make their own decisions. That's all come about through case law. There was a big case in the mid-80s with someone called Victoria Gillick, who took the government to court after her sort of 14 or 15-year-old daughter was given the contraceptive pill without her knowing. And the legal case, the legal judgment as a result of that, established something called the Gillick competence. So if the child is, it's usually from 12 up, if they're judged to be competent to make their own decisions, then the parents should be informed. So the parents don't need to be informed. That judgment was actually challenged, and it fell to High Court Judge Lord Fraser, who then issued something called the Fraser Guidelines, which said that, in general, the parents should be informed, but only in exceptional circumstances that they shouldn't. So, perhaps meaning if they have some, abusive alcoholic father or something, then the doctor, nurse can make that judgment not to inform them. But that's been, very, in practice, that's been very kind of loosely interpreted and applied to the extent that, in most cases, any young person who says, well, I don't want my parents to know because they'd kill me, or because they react really badly, then they wouldn't have to be told. Teachers are also not legally bound to inform parents about their child's sexual activity. So, if they know that the child has been referred to sexual health services, supplied with contraception, sexually active, then the teacher doesn't have to inform their parents. If they're really concerned, the first rule of safeguarding, according to the Department of Education, is that children's social services should be informed, not the parents. The SRE guidance also recommends, as I mentioned, that SRE should ideally be delivered through the PSHE citizenship route. There was supplementary guidance issued in 2014, and this was sort of written and published as a collaboration between the Department of Education, also the PSHE Association, Brooke, which is a sexual health charity, promotes abortion, contraception, etc., and the Sex Education Forum, all the main players in promoting compulsory RSE, and they published this new sort of supplementary guidance, which was supposed to be sort of updated in the 2010, and really that just sort of, as you can imagine, just sort of strips all kind of, mention of marriage or importance of family life and all of that kind of thing out. There's this, what we get now is this new stress on consent. So that's the most important thing, equipping young people to make decisions for themselves, giving them the knowledge about contraception and when they're being abused and when they should and shouldn't consent and all that. That is now the focus of much of the sex education that's coming into play. Okay, so that's the legal situation. So how's that working out in practice? There's various ways in which we see that parental rights are being undermined. So first of all, not in all cases, but often parents are misled or not properly informed or consulted about the sex education that their children are going to be provided with. So, for example, I had a call from someone 2 or 3 weeks ago. They were up in Scotland, actually, and they said, just got this letter from the headmaster of a school, I think it was a Catholic school, and they said the kids are going to have sex education starting, after half term, in a couple of weeks' time. You can't withdraw, that's it, you don't have a legal right to withdraw, we're just informing you it's happening. Anyway, I wasn't entirely sure about the situation in Scotland, so I just said, okay, I'll get back to you, I'll just check it out. Just a quick look on Google, on the Scottish Government website. I could see there the law was explained, and parents have the right to withdraw their children from RSE. And I rang up one of my colleagues in Scotland. I said, is this the case? And they said, yeah. So just got back to the parents and said, well, just show them what's on the government website, which they did. Job done. So that's just a clear example of the school just misinforming parents, and that happens quite a lot. So what's supposed to happen is that, according to the guidance, is that there's supposed to be an SRE policy that's published and easily accessible to parents or available on request, and that they are consulted. But schools in some cases will just erect certain barriers to parental involvement. So, it can be things like they give the letter to the child to come to the parents, and of course it just gets left in the school bag for several months, and the parent sees, far too late that they've had the sex education a month ago, or it can be just sort of announcing a meeting at short notice at a time that's not accessible for 70% of parents because they're at work and so forth. So various ways in which sort of schools don't always make it easy for parents. Abuse of the national curriculum for science. So, as I explained, the only thing that's stipulated that parents at the moment don't have a legal right to withdraw from is the biological aspects of human reproduction are an essential part of the science curriculum. But what happens is sex education, which goes beyond that, into talking about different sexual activities apart from the normal natural ones and contraception and all that, then gets smuggled into the science lessons. I actually had a call from one parent a couple of weeks ago whose children, they go to a Catholic secondary school, and they've been informed that the nurse was going to be taking sex education lessons with an outside nurse from the NHS, and because it's part of the science curriculum, the parents couldn't withdraw their children. So, then I explained to the parent, well, the only thing that's actually compulsory is strictly what's in the science curriculum, which is the biological aspects of human reproduction. And so if they're sort of farming that out to an NHS nurse, then it's clearly going beyond that. And then, well, the boys and girls were going to get separated and taken into sort of separate rooms with the nurse. So, what oversight was there going to be that, and this was a Catholic school, so, what oversight was there going to be that these children would be receiving a sex education in conformity with Catholic teaching? So then the parent got back to the headmistress actually, the head teacher, and she said, this NHS nurse, she's specially trained to deal with all the sort of, emotional aspects of puberty and, dealing with young women and everything. And she's, she'd be a better person to do it than the science teacher, this male science teacher. Well, the point is, the mother felt that she was the best person to be dealing with the emotional aspects of puberty and the rest of it with her daughter, not the NHS nurse, because she didn't know what she would be covering. So, it was very clear there that they were planning, or maybe the school was quite sort of gullible, but they were going to be going beyond what was a necessary part of the science curriculum, because otherwise, you know, if the science teacher isn't sort of qualified to teach that, he shouldn't be teaching any science at all. So that's just, you know, one example of the way that that requirement is getting abused. So also children within schools being signposted to either in-house or external sexual health services, and then, as I've explained, they will be working on the Department of Health Code of Conduct, so, you know, confidentiality, not necessarily informing the parents. This can be happening in Catholic schools. For instance, there was a government agency sort of program called Connections, which you know, many schools of all types were using. This was a sort of government program, and it was there to give, you know, all kinds of advice to young people. So it sounded, you know, really good and helpful. So it included careers advice, financial advice, all that kind of thing. But, you know, it also included sexual health advice. So we had these Connections people going to schools, including Catholic schools, and, you know, the pupils would be having confidential meetings with them. So, you know, what oversight was there from the schools that they weren't going to be offering the children contraception or referring them to abortions or whatever? Because it's a confidential meeting, so, you know, even if the head teacher, whatever, says, yes, you can come in, but don't talk about these things, you know, they're not going to know. They don't have any control over that. So various ways also in which parents are sidelined by the various safeguarding policies and processes. This promotion of this idea of the trusted adult who not the parent. You know, it even went so far in Scotland as this sort of named person scheme, which, you know, thank God didn't become law. But things like the NSPCC Childline, which, you know, virtually every school sort of promotes as a matter of course, and it seems like a, you know, sort of good thing to do. But you know, really, that is promoting the idea to children of you know, come to us with whatever you want to talk about. I think the slogan is, you know, no problem is too small, and yeah, it's promoting this idea that you should be, you know, coming to someone other than your parents. And, you know, okay, you know, maybe there should be a sort of helpline there for children who are, you know, in extreme situations and can't turn to their parents. But you know, that's not the way it's being promoted or necessarily used. You know, for instance, I had a colleague say that she found out her daughter, a sort of 11, 12-year-old daughter, had rang NSPCC Childline because she was worried about her homework. And so she kind of felt, you know, a bit sort of undermined by that. Okay, so other ways in which parents are being undermined. You know, we've faced the past 10, 20 or so years increasingly explicit, inappropriate teaching programs and resources in schools. So Channel 4's Living and Growing, for example, one of the most perhaps notorious examples that a lot of schools use. So a key thing with a lot of these programs and sort of the modern approach to sex education is sort of breaking down the sort of natural reserve of young people as early as possible, getting them, for instance, to identify and talk about their body parts and their genitalia. And this is promoted as a sort of safeguarding necessity, because if they know all about their body parts, genitalia and the names of them and everything, then they can be better aware and able to inform someone if they're being indecently touched, abused. So that's the idea, but of course there's serious problems with encouraging such young children to take an interest in their intimate body parts when they're probably not even thinking about those things, and it's just introducing them to a whole kind of area of life or awareness that for most parents would say the children are just not ready for. It can have all kinds of potentially dangerous consequences. For instance, young children becoming suspicious even of their parents' sort of natural interactions with them and care for them, bathing them, and so forth. So then, teaching primary school children about sexual activity before they're ready. Notoriously, this program featured animated depictions of sexual intercourse in Unit 2 of the program, which was designed for children sort of aged 7 to 9. So, this featured a cartoon couple, man and woman. They were sort of chasing each other around the room, and then sort of jumped on the bed and were having sexual intercourse. And the disturbing thing was there was sort of a voiceover sort of narrative in this sequence, talking about sort of how it is. Which, of course, it is for adults in the right context, but it's never fun for children. And we did have reports and parents come to us and saying that even that their children, sort of 8 years old in school, had been acting out what they had seen. We had parents saying that their child had been literally traumatized by what they had seen. Encouragement of masturbation, for example, or at least presenting it as something normal and natural part of growing up. For secondary school children, so 11 to 13, the focus then switches very much onto contraception and accessing sexual health services. Of course, marriage, sideline, the focus is very much on healthy relationships, on consent, the child deciding when they're ready. So, also, what we have now is, obviously the whole LGBT thing is massive, and it's just completely snowballed in the past 10, 20 years, and that's been really driven through so-called anti-bullying campaigns. I mean, victimhood has always been used really to promote the homosexual agenda. But this kind of bullying, although I'm sure it does happen, is actually extremely rare. There was a very wide survey, something called the Teacher Voice survey. It was carried out a couple of years ago, and the result of that was something like 0% of teachers said that they'd witnessed or encountered so-called homophobic bullying frequently, and there's something like 5%, 10% said they'd experienced it even rarely. And what the most reliable survey shows is that, children are bullied for a whole range of reasons, but it's mainly because they're sort of different in some way, whether it's because of their weight, or they wear glasses, or their something to do with their perceived social class, or whatever, but the fact is you can have an anti-bullying campaign and you can teach respect for everybody, including those who might experience same-sex attraction, but as we'll see, that's not good enough for Ofsted now. That's not good enough for the authorities. We've got to specifically focus on and highlight this one particular form of bullying. LGBT acceptance, it's very much promoted as a human rights issue, and obviously the distinction between people who experience same-sex attraction and actual homosexual activity is completely blurred in the process, and there's no place for dissent. So even at primary school, this is now increasingly the norm. So we were involved with helping parents in Birmingham, a campaign against something called the Challenging Homophobia in Primary Schools, the CHIPS program it was known as, and this was teaching resources for the whole curriculum. So it goes beyond just the sex education classes, and you'll find sort of like the children introduce the books like this in just their reading classes, English classes, like Princess Boy, Tango Makes Three, It's Perfectly Normal, King and King, It Takes Love and some other stuff, To Make a Baby, to Mummies there. Kind of songs and posters and activities that are supposed to be used in pretty much every part of the curriculum. That's morphed now into something called Educate and Celebrate, which many schools are using. And just this is such an entrenched official state ideology now. Before I was working for SPUC, I was worked in education for a long time in further education college, and these sort of posters were absolutely plastered everywhere. And I've also worked as a supply teacher in secondary schools. Probably got into about 30 secondary schools in my sort of local region, and the majority of them have these sorts of posters plastered about the place. They do that to make a good impression for Ofsted, mainly, and to tick the box. And most of them do things like celebrate LGBT History Month. The college where I used to work, for a whole month, every February, I had to walk into the college building and had the rainbow flag was flying high over the college. So sometimes I just sort of think I've sort of woken up in a foreign country. It seems like we've got a sort of new national flag now. Well, actually, it's an international flag. It's like a one world government flag. I think. Sadly, Catholic schools have not been altogether immune from this. There's many good Catholic schools and good Catholic head teachers, but it seems that in a lot of quarters they've also sort of fallen in with this whole LGBT agenda starting to. This is a document that was issued by the Catholic Education Service in partnership with St Mary's University, Twickenham. It's called Made in God's Image, Challenging Homophobic and Biphobic Bullying in Catholic Schools. This was sent to every head of every Catholic diocesan education service in the country. But there was a bit of a backlash behind the scenes about it, and it was hastily withdrawn pending a second edition, which hasn't appeared yet. But you've got to ask, how on earth did this thing surface in the first place from the Catholic Education Service, because it's absolutely appalling. It's satanic, really. I mean, it's basically what we know is a Stonewall document, because we see that large chunks of it have just been copied and pasted from the Stonewall document challenging homophobia, biphobia in schools. And it's got sort of various selected bits of scripture and Catholic teaching sort of taken out, cherry-picked, taken out of context and shoehorned in to indoctrinate children with a very clear impression that if you are against the LGBT agenda in any way, if you have any kind of thought that could constitute so-called homophobia, including any disapproval of homosexuality, then you're basically sinful. Just to give you a flavour, this is from the introduction, and this gives you a sort of idea of the approach. It says the church teaches that homosexual persons, quote, must be accepted with respect, compassion and sensitivity, quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The school should be mindful that the church teaches that homosexual inclinations are not sinful. For older pupils who may publicly identify themselves as such, church schools should be havens of respect and custodians of the true dignity of each human being. They should be as attentive to the possibility of homosexual pupils being marginalised and bullied as they are to discrimination based on religion, gender, race, or disability. So, clearly it's presenting Catholic teaching to a certain extent, but what's being left out there that might be quite important to inform children about?
The behaviour.
Yeah, behaviour. It's making no distinction between homosexual persons, people who have homosexual inclinations, which the church teaches is not sinful, and homosexual behaviour. So it's deliberately blurring the lines. And there's a whole programme. If anybody wants this, I don't know if it's still available on the Catholic Education's website or whether it's been withdrawn, but I can happily provide you with a copy. And there's just a whole scheme of work there with lesson plans and it's just basically in a nutshell just presents the idea that I suppose your sort of sexuality is a gift from God, it's part of you, and it really sort of conflates and confuses all the sort of teaching about the sanctity of human life and dignity of the human person with the idea of having a sexual identity, homosexual identity, bisexual identity, and so forth.
When was it produced again?
This was last year. Date. Yeah, it was last year.
But it didn't get very far.
Didn't get very far. All the diocesan education services had an email saying, this is the new document from the CES, how many copies do you want? So I don't know whether this has gone into schools and been used. It's a horrifying thought if it has. We don't know what the second edition is going to be like. I mean, maybe it's going to be withdrawn because they haven't mentioned transphobia there. So if they're going to tick all the offset boxes, they've got to include transphobia as well. Otherwise, they're not covering all the protected characteristics. This is from another document which I think is still available, Learning to Love, an Introduction to Catholic RSC for Catholic Educators, with a foreword by Archbishop McMahon, who's chair of the Catholic Education Service. This is taken from this sort of section on marriage and relationships, actually. We would like to emphasise that this exalted form of love exists just as powerfully in relationships between people of the same sex as it does in heterosexual relationships. We applaud the great progress that has been made in countering all forms of discrimination against homosexuality in recent times, and wish to collaborate with efforts to make such discrimination obsolete. That's the exact wording. So again, how has Catholic teaching been distorted there? Can anyone spot it? Well, exactly. Yeah, not homosexual persons. Not all forms of discrimination against homosexual persons, but against homosexuality. So again, deliberately blurring the person with the acts. Okay, so as I said, we've got this official state ideology now, which is being increasingly ruthlessly enforced by the organs of the state, particularly through Ofsted inspections. And schools can literally face closure if they aren't doing enough to promote this LGBT agenda. And I'll give you an example in a moment. But first of all, how can they do this? Well, there's three kind of laws or statutory instruments that Ofsted use to enforce the LGBT agenda. So, first of all, there's the Equality Act, which was a law passed in 2010, which sort of amalgamated certain existing equality laws like the Racial Equality Act and several others into a whole combined Equality Act, and it created so-called protected characteristics. So we've actually got away from this idea of everybody being equal. Really, we're now in a situation where people with, or groups of people with so-called protected characteristics are more equal than others because they have specific protection in the law. So this includes people in categories of their age and race and disability. You may think fair dues. That's good.
There's no disability in that list.
No, there's 9 of them. I haven't listed them all now. So yeah, there are 9 of them. But I've just listed the problematic ones. Sexual orientation. Obviously, as Catholics, we can believe that our sexuality is orientated towards heterosexual marriage, but sexual orientation, well, you know what it means these days. Gender reassignment, and that is, people who are transitioning or have transitioned to another gender. And you've probably seen a lot of the news recently, or sort of a few months ago, the government was under big pressure to update the laws on gender identity, to make it much easier. Because at the moment you have to be over 18 and you have to have sort of referral from your doctors and live 2 years in your transitioning state and everything. Before then, you can officially become the new gender, and you get your birth certificate can be then falsified to say you were born as a new gender. But the thing is, you can't change it back. So if you've done all that and you think you've made a mistake, say I decided I wanted to be a woman and transition, and I went through it all, birth certificate changed, and then I realised, oh no, that was all a big mistake. Well, that's it, too bad. It's there in black and white. I was a woman all along, even though I wasn't. How crazy is that? So anyway, the government, at least when Justine Greening was the Equalities Minister, wanted to sort of make it much easier, so it's fast track, so anybody who declares themselves a new gender identity can, well, basically, just free to become whatever gender you want. So,
and you can flip-flop.
I don't know, because the sort of details of the law never were sort of established, but I would presume so. Yeah. Because gender is a sort of fluid thing. But if you're homosexual, of course, you can't transition to be a heterosexual. Yeah. And any kind of so-called conversion therapy or spiritual health guidance, whatever, they want to ban that as well. Marriage and civil partnerships, that's obviously problematic for us because now it includes same-sex marriage and civil partnerships. Well, that can only be a same-sex couple. That's it. So if you're a same-sex couple, you have a choice of a civil partnership or marriage, whereas if you're heterosexual, you've just got plain old marriage.
Like you said, that's because they're more equal.
They're more equal, exactly. And pregnancy and maternity, we might say, well, that's not problematic. that's good because we wouldn't want women discriminated against because they're pregnant. And no, of course we wouldn't. But the problem is in like the equality and diversity training, for instance, they try to impose on us at my old place of work. That included the you have to sort of respect someone's right to choose an abortion if they want to, because you have to completely honour and respect the pregnant woman's choice, whatever it is. So I remember one equality and diversity training I had to do, or I tried to make me do, it was an online one, it's sort of multiple choice thing, and the question was, a female colleague comes into the office and announces that she's pregnant but doesn't want to keep it and she plans to have a termination. Should you A, try to dissuade her from that, or say something disapproving, or B, say, well, that's fine, I support your decision. And of course the right answer was B. If you chose A, then you got marks down. So that's an example of how something sort of even good gets turned on its head and perverted, corrupted. In combination of that, you've got something called the Public Sector Equality Duty, introduced in 2011, and that puts a legal obligation on all public sector bodies, so schools, hospitals, police, whatever, to actively eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity, foster good relations between those of protected characteristics and those without protected characteristics. So, in short, basically, public sector institutions are expected to actively promote the LGBT agenda in its entirety. And also, we've got these whole new values, virtues, fundamental British values, invented by the government, like Cameron and Gove and people like that in 2011. It's part of the prevent strategy to, mainly to counter Islamic extremism, but they didn't want to identify it as Islamic extremism, so it's all kinds of extremism, including Christian extremism, like disagreeing with same-sex marriage. So that requires, as part of the inspection framework, the Department of Education standards, they have to actively promote these so-called British values, which are democracy, rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. And you might think, they sound fair enough, quite broad, and they are. They're quite vague, deliberately vague, but in combination with these two, basically it's come down to, again, schools are expected to actively promote the LGBT agenda. So what does this mean in practice? Well, schools really do risk failing Ofsted inspections, facing severe sanctions, including deregistration, if they don't actively promote the LGBT ideology, because otherwise they're seen as not helping to prepare children for life in modern Britain. So this is the case of the Vichnitz Jewish primary school for girls. I don't know if you heard of this case. So this was a private fee-paying school. Parents, paying £5,000 or £6,000 a term to have their children educated in the Orthodox Jewish faith. And it failed its third Ofsted inspection and is now facing closure, specifically for not teaching young children about homosexuality and transgenderism. And this is not an exaggeration, and the Ofsted report states this actually clearly, because every normal indicator of a good school, the teaching and the academic standards, proved to be perfectly fine. The teachers were praised for their good subject knowledge and high quality classroom resources, all that. Yet the school was judged inadequate because it, quote, did not meet all of the independent school standards that were checked during this inspection. This is actual wording taken from the original Ofsted report. Now, I looked on the Ofsted website today, and it looks like they've actually edited the report to take some of this out, but I've got the original copy. And it says, during the visit, leaders of the school were not able to show that pupils are taught explicitly about issues such as sexual orientation. By the way, remember we're talking about primary school children here, age between 4 up to 9. This restricts pupils' spiritual, moral, social, and cultural development, and does not promote equality of opportunity in ways that take account of differing lifestyles. As a result, pupils are not able to gain a full understanding of fundamental British values. The school's culture, however, is clearly focused on teaching pupils to respect everybody, regardless of beliefs and lifestyles. It acknowledges that. That's what the school does. Leaders and proprietors recognise the requirement to teach about protected characteristics, as set out in the Equality Act 2010. However, they acknowledge that they do not teach pupils about all the protected characteristics, particularly those relating to gender reassignment and sexual orientation. This means that pupils have a limited understanding of the different lifestyles and partnerships that individuals may choose in present-day society. So, there we go. Parents can't even sort of protect their children. They're sending their children to this school because they want to prepare them for life in modern Britain properly by giving them a proper formation in the truth and meaning of human sexuality and to protect them from perversion. And you can see how things have been completely turned on their head and twisted. So what we're facing, and you've probably seen all the news stories and case studies that are coming out day by day. I mean, it's just like a treadmill, dealing with something more extreme every single day. But we've just got this huge transgender juggernaut now. So primary school children increasingly indoctrinated with the idea that gender is a social construct and fluid and chosen. I was sort of encountering all this sort of ideology in university 25 years ago, and I thought it was all crazy then, but that was just sort of academics in their ivory towers, and now this is mainstream. This is what our children are being taught. So the whole male-female distinction increasingly being removed from every aspect of school life, increasing use of gender-neutral uniform policies now. Most new schools that are built now will have gender-neutral toilets. We went to visit this new secondary school in Peterborough around there now, and again, sort of open plan toilets, got cubicles, now. And actually, this is the norm now in Scotland. It's like a sort of regulation. Every school that's built has to have gender-neutral toilets. Staff and pupils forced to lie about the true sex of so-called trans pupils. So, just to highlight several of the high-profile cases, there was Nigel and Sally Rowe on the Isle of Wight, who had to remove their 6-year-old son from their Church of England primary school because they received a letter from the school saying that the children had been informed that they must address this little boy who decided he was a girl by a girl's name, and obviously they were sort of horrified that their child was being taught to lie in this way. And this was actually the second time it had happened to them. They'd already experienced it with another of their children. And these are just the high-profile cases that we know about. It's happening all over now. The case of Joshua Sutcliffe, secondary school maths teacher, who was sacked for misgendering a pupil because there was a girl who just declared herself a boy and wanted people to call her by a boy's name. And he was actually sort of praising her. He said something, "Oh, well done, girls," or something, and included her in it, and she complained, and he was immediately dismissed. Increasing cases like that all the time, and most staff are having sort of transgender awareness training now and things like that. So that's the situation at the moment, and so you've got to ask yourselves, well, if all this is happening now, when relationships and sex education is supposedly optional, what is it going to be like when it's compulsory? As I said, we had a big change in the law. March 2017, the government finally buckled under pressure. Well, it didn't need that much persuading, really. But so what's happening as a result of the changes in the law? So you've got 2 compulsory new subjects now, which are part of the national curriculum and have to be taught, not just in local maintained schools or state schools, but in all schools. So at primary school, it takes the form of so-called relationships education, compulsory in every type of school, whether it's a faith school, private school, independent school, everything except a home school. But the government's got that's something that's also under threat as well. So there's no parental right to withdrawal whatsoever. At secondary school, it comes in the form of relationships and sex education, RSE, again compulsory in all secondary schools. Parents have the right to withdraw their children from the sex education aspects of RSE, but there are various problems with that. So at the moment, it's all very vague. We don't know what's going to be in the statutory guidance that's coming from the Department of Education. So did anybody make a submission to the consultation in February? A couple of you, that's good, yeah. So this was all, supposed to have a public consultation to determine the content of relationships and sex education. That consultation had with thanks to the campaigns and awareness of not just ourselves but all the sort of pro-life, pro-family groups. I got 23,000 submissions, which was unprecedented for a government consultation. And I went to an event in Parliament. It was a week or so before the consultation closed, and they said like 43% of submissions were from parents. That was so far at that stage. So they were the biggest group of people who responded. This is all. The idea is that the government was supposed to publish draft guidance, which was then going to be debated and voted on in Parliament before the summer recess. So the guidance was going to be published so that schools would have a year to prepare for this, their curriculums for the new subject, and it's going to be introduced in September 2019. However, the government has not published the report on the consultation yet, let alone the draft guidance, and it's looking increasingly like it's not going to make its deadline, because it has to give the schools a year to prepare for this, according to its own regulations. So that's probably because it just got so many submissions. So we don't know we don't know how much flexibility schools are going to have, including faith schools, in the teaching of these new subjects. But importantly, children may have the right to override their parents' decisions, because in the Department of Education policy document from March last year, it states that the Secretary of State for Education is going to consult further on the age at which children have the right to make their own decisions on this. And, given what I've explained about the Gillett competence and Fraser guidelines in relation to medical treatment and healthcare, it'll probably be 12 or 13. So the right of parental withdrawal may be completely worthless anyway if the children can just decide yes they do want to be in the sex education. And then it all rests on this as yet ill-defined distinction between relationships education on the one hand and sex education on the other. So, who decides what constitutes sex education? Because a lot of the whole justification for making this relationships education compulsory has been to tackle all these new sexual threats of the digital age. So internet pornography and sexting, and these subjects are all inherently sexual in nature. So the things that parents might want to deal with in their own way. And of course, the government's already stated it. Theresa May said this, Nick Gibb, the schools minister, said this. The relationships education at primary school will be LGBT inclusive. Because it's got to meet the needs of all pupils. So, again, it's inherently sexual. So will parents be able to say, well, hold on, no, that's sex education, I want to teach that in my own way? Probably not. So, as well as that, we've just seen how this official state ideology imposed on every aspect of the school life, and probably with the curriculum as well. So we've seen how Ofsted, using fundamental British values in conjunction with the Equality Act, there's been recently published draft new independent school standards. There's a consultation on that closes at midnight tomorrow. It's caught a lot of us unawares. I sent a briefing out, which was Coalition for Marriage briefing. They produced a briefing about it, so the Christian Institute. That's sort of horrifying. It's like a sort of manifesto for state totalitarianism. It's basically saying that school will fail if, for instance, it's taught that the actual wording is something like, if it's taught that same-sex marriage should not be part of the civil law. So basically, if you disagree with, if the pupils, because it said the inspectors will test the pupils' learning, on this. So, you know, if they're interviewing the people, which they do, you know, that's what they did at Bishop School, and that's what they've done at Christian schools, taking the children aside and saying, well, what do you know about lesbianism? Do you know that two men or two women can marry? And if they say, well, yes, but our teacher says that only a man and woman can marry and the law is wrong, well, you know, they're failing the independent school standards. This is concerning because we're seeing this as a possible blueprint for what's going to be in the wider Ofsted framework, which would cover all schools. And I don't know if you saw it announced on the news last week, a new Welsh curriculum is being announced, which has come into force 2022. And it's being hailed as the most progressive relationships and sex education in the world, because it's completely LGBT inclusive. So, you know, we've got to get started on some major campaign about that in Wales, because again, that's a possible blueprint for what's coming. So I've talked quite a lot there, and hopefully you're not pressing too much. You're very welcome. It's great to meet you all.